Conservative Cat here. Thanks so much for tuning in. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel, folks, by hitting the subscribe button. We have a daily show here. It's from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. every single day, Monday through Friday. Now, I have an exclusive interview with the candidate in the congressional district. It's 17, right? Candidate Judge Joe McGraw.
Yep, Illinois 17.
Illinois 17. Currently, we have Eric Sorenson in that district. So tell me a little bit first, Joe, about who you are, Judge Joe McGraw. So tell me about your time as a judge. Before we get into Eric Sorenson politicizing, of course, Hurricane Milton. We've got to talk about that here on Conservative Cat. But tell me first about your time as a judge and why you're running in the 17th Congressional District.
Thanks, Kat. Retired last July after 22 years as a judge and as a chief judge. For the entire state of Illinois, I was chief judge of the Conference of Chief Judges. And so I met a lot of people all over the state, Republicans, Democrats, and developed a good network to see what's going on statewide, not just in the Rockford area where I was presiding. And in the last year or two, what we noticed was all the crime and drugs coming across the southern border unabated. Increase in crime. I have a human trafficking court in Rockford, the only one outside of Cook County. And so we could see things from that perspective. And of course, the real game changer was fentanyl. 80% of it comes across the southern border, manufactured by communist China. And it is the pipeline, they're shipping that through across the open southern border, that's killing Americans. Right now, it's the number one cause of death for men between 18 and 45. It's just catastrophic. It's been over 100,000 fentanyl deaths. And Illinois, including the 17th Congressional District, we're sixth in the nation for fentanyl deaths. And so seeing that, the crime, the deteriorating economy, and the wild wokeness and out of touch stances of Sorenson, his climate alarmism, his LGBTQ activism. I wanted to give my kids and my grandkids an opportunity to grow up in the greatest country in the world that I had, and that's why I decided to run.
Well, speaking of Eric Sorenson and his out of touch campaign, I mean, I have only two politicians where I subscribe to their tweets and get the notifications. So on my little fitness watch, I'll get the notifications when Jellybean, JB Pritzker tweets out, and then also Eric Sorenson, because I love, it's entertaining. It's entertaining to watch them tweet because they're so out of touch with people in this district. And this is just one example. And I want to play this really quick. This is a little bit about Hurricane Milton and Helene, and they're talking about how in Project 2025, which I've read through, this has nothing to do with Donald Trump. You know that. It's been, Snopes knows that. Political fact-checking agencies have fact-checked this and said that Donald Trump has not been tied to Project 2025. This is Heritage Foundation. The crux of Project 2025, after reading through it, a lot of it has to deal with cutting government agencies, things like that. So in it, it talks about cutting from NOAA, which is and National Weather Service. These are agencies that provide technology forecasters. It's a great agency, but it's kind of silly to be talking about Project 2025 when it's not even real policy. This is like a wish list from a conservative organization called the Heritage Foundation. But just so that way the listener knows, hey, this is what Project 2025 is, and I want to make sure that information is out there. So, because that the mainstream didn't press him on that at all. But let's take a listen to this together, Joe, and I want you to react to it. Here we go.
Specifically, the Conservative Project 2025. Congressman Eric Sorenson of Illinois joins me now. Congressman, you worked as a meteorologist for decades, so we can almost take the politics out of it on this one. I mean, what's your reaction to a proposal that would end NOAA, end the National Weather Service, and why does that matter?
Yeah, it's outrageous when you think about it, because something as nonpartisan as the National Weather Service, which protects us, which issues the watches, the warnings, the National Hurricane Center, which literally they put themselves in harm's way when they get into airplanes to go and do the reconnaissance of tropical storms and hurricanes. We as Americans, we don't really bat an eye for the benefit of the National Weather Service. But just imagine for just a moment, if that were to go away, what would that mean for areas that have been ravaged, for people to not get the warnings ahead of time? What would it mean for even air travel if we didn't have forecasters understanding turbulence? Or what would we be talking about today on this Saturday? A new tropical storm, Milton, has formed in the Gulf of Mexico, which is again setting its eyes on Central Florida.
Before I let you take your weatherman hat off, we've seen intensity of recent storms only growing. What do you see fueling that?
Yeah, so look, I mean,
Okay, I think you guys get the gist. He starts to fearmonger, say that, oh, NOAA's going to go away if conservatives, implement policies like 2025. Joe, I just wanted to get you on to react to that. I've got a question. I mean, people have accused him of politicizing these storms, of making people feel bad about driving their gas-powered car, and he goes on in this clip here to talk about climate change, and that's what's fueling these hurricanes. So I wanted to have you on to kind of respond, Joe McGraw.
Yeah, thanks so much. Gosh, where do you begin disassembling this? But the federal government, to my knowledge, has no intention of disbanding or disassembling, any of the services that are currently available. I think it's a big distraction on his part to start talking about the 2025 project. It's not been endorsed by anyone. It's just folks in a think tank came up with ideas, as you mentioned, to reduce the bloat in government agencies. And so he takes it to the absurd extreme, as though we are going to do away with all weather forecasting and so forth. But what he does, in politicizing it, is he's taking away from the government's failure to respond to the victims in the hurricane path. Kamala has politicized it. She's played a phone game with DeSantis. They have been slow to respond to North Carolina because, of course, that's red voter area. And so rather than talking about their own failures, their own failure to plan, their own failure to intervene and respond appropriately, now they're putting up this straw man about the 2025 project and saying, boy, pretty soon we won't have weathermen anymore, and it'll be back like in the Wizard of Oz days. We didn't see it coming, and it's so absurd. And I could go on about the climate change aspect if you want me to.
Oh, yeah, go on, because I don't know, this whole climate change aspect, at least to share my opinion a little bit, is, they'll tell you can't drive a gas-powered car, that you can't even eat meat. Some people could take it to that extreme, that you can't eat meat, and it's almost like victim blaming. These are hurricane victims, and they're saying, hey, the reason why this is happening is because of you not driving your electric vehicle, or eating meat, or, not subscribing to the latest climate change policy that we are advocating for. So it kind of feels like they're victim blaming, the Hurricane Helene victims for something that's really out of their control, their natural disasters. But do enlighten me. Let me know what your thoughts are here about the climate change aspect of this, where he says climate change is contributing to these hurricanes, these massive hurricanes.
Yeah. Well, to quote a famous Democrat strategist, never let a good crisis go to waste. And so here's an opportunity for them to talk about climate change. And, is there a measurable change in climate? Yes. But what causes it? Can we affect it? And it's important to know that the United States has reduced its CO2 emissions more than any other country in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so to think that, what one country can do as opposed to the rest of the world, like China, India, who aren't even abiding by any kind of climate change standards, that somehow that we, through our efforts, can affect the weather is dubious at best. There are all kinds of models based on many assumptions. And in fact, prior to this, I was reading the latest from climate change alarmists, which would include Eric Sorenson, and they were talking about the hurricanes will be coming from the Atlantic right before these Gulf hurricanes occupied the headlines. So they have no more idea in terms of preventing. They're not even very good at predicting. But the notion that they're somehow protecting us, we have to protect ourselves. States have to work with the federal government. These are natural phenomena. And, to somehow suggest that maybe things wouldn't have been that bad if we had adopted even more of their extremist green energy policies that have had a negligible effect on the climate that we can see, but we're reducing our CO2 anyway. And so there's never going to be enough to be done from their perspective in changing how we live, changing the fuel we use, changing the kind of stove we have in our kitchen, and the list goes on and on. Nothing will ever be enough until, everything that we rely on for freedom and prosperity, including fossil fuels, combustion automobiles, and Americans just want to be free. They want to be free from government interference. And the whole climate change agenda is just more red tape, more, boogeymen, so to speak, that like, oh my gosh, this is what's going to happen. If you think back to previous climate change alarmists, like Al Gore, I mean, we're all going to be underwater by now. All the glaciers are going to melt, and Miami and all these other cities and New York are going to be, under several feet of water. They don't have any more idea than you and I what the long-term effects will be, if any, of the change in temperature, nor do they have any realistic way of judging or measuring what effect or impact any of their extreme policies will have to even affect that. We have no idea. We cannot make economic policy based on something that can only loosely be called science.
Yeah, well, in that clip with MSNBC, and I just love the butt kissing that was going on there from the journalist. You're a meteorologist, and you have decades of experience. I was like, gosh, I mean, this is starting to sound like a little bit of an ad for the guy.
Yeah.
I don't see you out there, and I don't see media acting in that way with you, Joe McGraw. I'm going to be honest. Mainstream media, that is. Of course, you're going to be on my show, and then I'm going to say, yes, vote Joe McGraw, because I understand what's at stake here. And in that clip with this woman, he goes on and he says that, Hurricane Milton, these hurricanes are getting much worse as time goes on because of the climate change, because of the CO2 emissions and things like that, which, I mean, I don't know how you measure if that hurricane was worse than previous ones. Hurricane Katrina, right? You had thousands in the death toll. Now, I don't know exactly what the death toll, because people are saying, no, they're not reporting. Yeah, nobody knows right now. I mean, it's a couple hundred people. But to even claim that this was worse than hurricanes we've had in the past, I think is a little bit, it's a stretch. And to say that with such certainty that hurricanes are so much worse now than they have been in the past, I think that's disingenuous, not only to the victims of prior hurricanes, Hurricane Harvey, Hurricane Helene, right? Or because now we're on Milton, but there have been tragic hurricanes that have taken the lives of many people, and to claim that, oh, they're terrible now, and I mean, I feel like it's a bit disingenuous, but I mean, that's a small argument. The bigger argument is that what is everybody else doing to contribute to saving the planet?
Yeah.
Seems like the United States is the only one bringing down their carbon emissions. So,
and let me just add that as a judge, I dealt with facts. All right, you would engage in a rigorous fact-finding process to determine what were the facts, and what Eric Sorenson is maybe wasn't taught in weatherman school is that correlation doesn't equate to causation. So even if there is some measurable temperature change, there's no way to establish that there's causation causing a change in any weather pattern. Weather patterns change from time to time. And so to, suggest that, we need to further lower our CO2 and then somehow the hurricanes would be measurably less is speculation based on theory, based on conjecture, not fact.
Yeah. And one more thing that I want to chat about while I've got you on, maybe a couple more things, if you've got some time. And
Sure.
unlike the mainstream, I will press you on this. So I do want to share this with you for our listeners so that way they know what I'm referencing here. This is a tweet by Eric Sorenson. And he says, spot the difference, right? And if you're watching, you can see this live where you've got him showing a picture of him with several constituents or voters. They've got Eric Sorenson t-shirts on. And then there's another picture that has you. It's a photo of you with other constituents with, vote Judge Joe McGraw for Congress. These are just normal campaign photographs, right? Now I want to tell people what he says about these two photographs. He says, spot the difference between my supporters, who really represent Illinois 17, and the judge who lives in the suburbs and allowed a political friend's son out of jail after a sex crime. So I want to ask you, not about the sex crime, but first, I will ask you about the sex crime, but first, I do want to ask about what does he mean, spot the difference? Because I was trying to spot the difference and I didn't even really understand what he was saying. Is it a race thing? I don't know what he's saying here with these two photographs. So can you respond to his tweet here? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just saw that and I had to put on my thinking cap as well. I thought, what's the point? I think it's a combination of perhaps insinuating about racism because there are no African Americans in that particular picture. And I also think it's a reference to some sort of like class envy, class warfare. He's saying that I live in the suburbs, and I guess because he has some African Americans in his picture, that like indicating that this is where the real people are. They're the real constituents. And so there's several flaws in that very superficial comparison. The picture that he has of my campaign, that was taken in a parking lot in Freeport, Illinois at 8 a.m, cold day on a get out the vote rally. And I think Freeport, if you know anything about it, is kind of a blue collar Democratic area. And Stevenson County, and how are those people any less constituents than his? So I think he's insinuating there's kind of a class difference, and also insinuating there's kind of a race difference. But I think those suggestions fall flat because I put on almost 50,000 miles traversing the 14 counties of the district, and I've spoken to thousands and thousands and thousands of people, including union members and speaking at African American churches, and there is not a amalgamation of who is the 17th congressional district voter. It's a whole range of people. Farmers, he's saying farmers aren't part of the district because no one's on a combine. Is he saying factory workers aren't part of the district because don't represent the district because there's no one shown in a factory setting? Is he saying that single moms are not part of the district because they're not shown separately? It's attempt at racism and class warfare.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of sad because you've got in this photograph all these people lined up in front, the Black Americans here. They're all lined up in the front, and it almost feels forced, or it feels racist to me. I mean, really, I'm just going to be blunt, and I'm going to say this feels racist. It feels like he took this photograph deliberately, and he put all the black people out in front, in order to take a dig at you for not visiting, or for not taking, or having one, or a photo, which I'm sure I know you have plenty of photographs of being on the campaign trail, talking with black voters, right, and people throughout the district. But this feels forced. It feels awkward, and it feels like, have you heard of that term, token black guy? It feels like he's put these black voters in front of this photograph to take a dig at you on the campaign trail, which I think that you're using somebody's race to take a dig at a political opponent feels racist to me, right?
Yeah. Well, I think
feels a little racist to me. I don't know.
Yeah.
It doesn't pass the smell test for me, as I like to say. It feels forced and weird, and it made me itchy. It made my skin crawl a bit.
Well, Eric Sorenson refused to talk about issues. Okay. He refuses to debate me. He's made false allegations about me in my judicial career, and I know we'll get to that in a moment. But so he substitutes his lack of accomplishments, his lack of experience in dealing with the issues, the open border, which he's opposed. I mean, he's opposed closing the open border. And so rather than have to talk about the issues that are important to the district, talk about the economy and the jobs going overseas, he uses imagery and he uses false statements because he's shallow and he's not truthful.
Like you said, we were going to get here in a moment. In that tweet as well, we know that he mentioned the judge who lives in the suburbs and allowed a political friend's son out of jail after a sex crime. I know that you probably know what he's referring to. And I thought, well, let's have the judge on. There's a judge out there. I really like this saying. He used to be a Supreme Court Justice, Burke. I think it's Mike Burke. He used to have this saying where it was, judges don't wear red, they don't wear blue, they wear black, right? And I'd imagine that your caseload, right, you judged according to that black robe. Hey, and I'm going to be not biased towards my friends or anything. So I want you to explain what he's talking about here first off.
Well, again, it's an attempt to disparage me and my 20 plus years as a presiding criminal division judge in Rockford in the 17th congressional or 17th judicial district, and was also, as I mentioned, chief judge. I was chair of Supreme Court committees on equality from 2015 on through the time I retired. I taught other judges, everything from due process and procedural fairness to other substantive issues. And my record is impeccable, and I stand by my record. And my record's an open book. It's in the court files. And so his first attack was saying that I gave a sex offender probation when the minimum was 6 years. And I'll get to the most recent one in a moment. And I thought, well, he's saying I gave an illegal sentence when he should have gotten 6, but I gave him probation. So, like I always do, I checked the facts. I looked at the court file. And this was not a sentence that I imposed, but a plea agreement reached between the defense attorney, who happens to be State Rep Dave Vella, and the state's attorney, to dismiss the 4 penitentiary cases and plead to the 2 probation cases. And they had a plea deal, which they presented. Plea deals are very common. Probably 90 to 95% of the cases are resolved by plea deal. So it wasn't as though the state was, asking for a 6-year penitentiary sentence. And instead, I violated the law and gave him probation. So I have to say that Eric Sorenson is a liar. He's lied about the record. because he lies, he's untrustworthy. And if he's untrustworthy, he's unfit for Congress. Now, this latest allegation, whenever I know or a party or an attorney, I always give them an opportunity to know about it. Like, I ask them, do they want me to recuse myself? If I know the defendant or defendant's family, I'll put that on the record, and I'll ask the state and the defense both. I tell them whether or not it would affect my impartiality, and I said in this case it will not. Like you said, I'm calling balls and strikes, the same for everybody. But if it makes somebody uncomfortable, they can ask me to recuse myself. And that way I keep everything above board. It's not like someone finds out after I ruled, oh, I heard he knows so-and-so. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's false. And then when it comes to the actual case itself, Eric Sorenson's never criticized cashless bail. Okay. He's never talked about that. But back before they became implemented, when we had more authority to impose conditions of bond, there'd be significant cash bond that was posted by this person's parents, as I recall, and also numerous conditions based on what we knew about him and his background, including living in a controlled living environment and having curfews, and the list goes on and on. It so happens that in the 2+ years, I think, before the case was resolved, that one of the key witnesses recanted or became uncooperative, and the case didn't have they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, and they reduced it to a lesser sentence. And so you have to see things in context,
Yeah.
Without context, it's just pretext. And that's what Sorenson has done.
Well, yeah, and to not give the whole picture and to make such a blatant claim like you were giving favors to somebody's son who was charged with a sex crime, and not knowing that context of, hey, before I even heard the case, I put all my cards out on the table. The prosecution and the defense could have asked me to recuse myself. They obviously didn't do that. I mean, it's just so disingenuous, and it's really an attack on our judicial system.
It is.
And they always come after us and say we're attacking democracy. That's an attack on democracy and our judicial system and the way it works, But where are these people when it comes to no cash bail and actually being tough on crime? I'm sure he's a proponent of no cash bail and releasing hardened criminals.
Yeah, he's never opposed it, and I've spoken out repeatedly about it. My colleagues who are still on the bench cannot speak freely. I can. I don't want to speak for them. I'll just speak for myself. It is an administrative burden and nightmare, and it doesn't do anything to advance the case, just much more procedural red tape. And, some people are pronouncing it a success. Some aren't so sure. But any major sea change like this takes a while to get all the data in. But even more to the point, Eric Sorenson doesn't deal in facts. He's not trustworthy, so he'll want to malign my time as a judge presiding. I preside over everything from death penalty cases to child custody cases, and I did every one of those cases to the best of my ability. Praying about the decisions I made, asking for wisdom and strength to do the right thing, because justice is not a one-size-fits-all. It's individualized. And you want to make sure you're doing the right thing, considering the defendant, considering the victims, considering the community, all the factors you have to consider. And I don't think he's ever done anything more stressful than, perhaps reading a teleprompter live on the air, as a weatherman. But what does he know? What does he know about it?
Or hosting a drag show, which I wanted to get to that.
Right.
Which, I mean, you've got this guy saying you're damned if you're you're damned if you don't. They want leniency for the defendants, and if you give them leniency, then they're going to accuse you of providing favors for your friends, right? So it's just like, if you give them not even leniency, if you just
It's what
rule
the evidence supports.
on the evidence. Yeah, if you just rule
Mhm.
based on the evidence, what it supports, then you're screwed either way.
Yeah.
That you can't satisfy these people, and it's so terrible. It's so terrible that this guy Eric Sorenson, he was approached by Fox News and he wouldn't answer. He ran away from the question of him hosting drag shows for kids. I mean, I don't know what gets more perverse than that. That in itself, I believe, is a sex crime. But your comments there.
Actually, I'm going to correct the record here, so to speak. Fox News, when they caught up with them, they said, do you have any regrets about hosting drag shows for kids? And he said, no. That's the complete transcript. So here's a guy who is way out of the mainstream, doesn't reflect us or our values, who doesn't see any problem with having young children, young boys, at an event where there are adult men dressed like women engaging in sexualized behavior in front of these kids. And I really had to scratch my head on that one. I thought, there's a guy who, if he even thinks that's okay, is so out of step with the values in the district. And as a parent, we have 5 adult kids, 4 girls and a boy, and a couple grandkids. And all my time on the bench, seeing the different things that affected young children negatively, and the importance of having good, strong parental role models. And parents are the best ones in the vast majority of the cases to communicate values to their kids. We don't need a politician who's doing drag shows and inviting kids to come. That's not our role model. That doesn't represent our values at all. And he's unrepentant. He's proud of it. He said, no, he doesn't regret it.
I don't have any regrets. Wow. I didn't even know that. So the mainstream, it's amazing how the mainstream kind of conflates. I was looking at that story through the lens of, I think it was MSNBC or something like that, where they were talking about how he was approached and he was denying that he even hosted these drag shows. It just goes to show you how much misinformation is out there. He doesn't deny it. Well, and if you take a gander at his social media, he is out and proud about drag shows, LGBTQ, which, I get it, right? But we're talking about children.
Right.
Children who do not think about sexual preferences or orientation at all at the age of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 years old. They don't think about that kind of thing. It's forced on them via the books at the libraries, the school libraries, and he's all proponent of that as well. The pornography in schools. But I wanted to show our listeners this tweet really quickly. This is from Eric Sorenson, and he goes, quote, "For many of us, this is true." And it's a photograph of a guy with a dog, and he's walking the dog, but then projected onto the background is a shadow, and it's a guy with a child. It's implying that our pets are our children, and for so many of us, this is true. The pets are our children. I take deep issue with this. I love my pets. I've got 3 dogs and a cat. Joe, I don't know if you have pets.
Yeah,
but,
sure do. Dogs.
I have many. I'm a young woman, 25 years old. I have many friends at this age where they're becoming pregnant, right? And they say the most annoying thing is when people compare their pets to a child, or like their pets as children. For example, I've got a friend, and I was like, "Yeah, Winnie, she's my little fur baby," and she goes, "Yeah, just don't have a real baby. It's it's tough, right? And it's much tougher than a fur baby, And a lot of women take issue with that, and I know it's simple, but it really just bothers me. I'm not a mother, but it bothers me as a woman that he would compare animals to a living human being. And that just kind of shows you where his priorities are at and what he thinks his ideology is, where he's equating human life to a dog, right? I love my pets, but
Yeah.
it's not that way for a lot of us. For many of us, this is true. I don't know. I think people who even unfortunately can't have children wouldn't say that dogs are the equivalent of children. And I think it's just a very out of touch thing to say. Your thoughts there on the tweet. I know it's kind of silly, but I found it and I was like, that's kind of offensive. I know many of my friends would be like, no, that's not the same.
Yeah. I'm not going to get into the entanglement that J.D. Vance got into talking about childless cat ladies. Okay. although I am a dog owner, my wife and I have Lena, who's a pit lab mix that we rescued, and they do become like family. Everyone loves Lena, and she plays an important part in our lives. But kids are different. Okay. You don't need to be a scientist to know that, but any parent knows all the differences. But the point is, I'm not going to do look at that drawing and have some kind of Rorschach test. What do you see there? What's the real message there? And whether or not Eric Sorenson is gay or wants to go to drag shows or do drag shows or what his views on LGBTQ and all that. If he was a private citizen, I could care less. Mm-hmm. This isn't about ostracizing anyone or persecuting anyone or anything like that. But when you use your public office to promote your personal points of view, your personal agendas that don't come from the district.
Mm-hmm.
When I've talked to people, the two things they always mention are border crime and drugs in the economy. No one's ever said, I don't think we have enough services for LGBTQ, or I feel like we're, homophobic and we need to correct that, or something like that. So that's coming from Sorenson. That's not coming from the district. So when he makes those his, like showpiece issues or whatever, he is using his position as a congressional representative to promote his own agenda. And he's supposed to be working for the people of the 17th congressional district. And that's why I've spoken to thousands and thousands, so that when I go to DC, I can accurately represent their issues, their priorities. And, and especially when he wants to get into, government funding and all that. There's another, parents, taxpayers, we don't want any money going towards the indoctrination of our children. We want to be the ones that convey those values. We don't want taxpayer dollars going towards gender reassignment surgery. If an adult wants to do that, that's up to them if they can afford it. But this is not an area where the government should even be involved in the lives of 9 to 12-year-olds or 12 to 14-year-olds who are, at best, as adolescents, going through a lot of changes emotionally, physically. Who am I really? Who hasn't asked that question? Or why am I here? What is my purpose? And to suggest that irreversible mutilation surgery that irreversibly mutilates, or drugs that can cause permanent damage, is the answer for someone at that age without the parental involvement is reckless at best. It's indoctrination in its worst form, and it's an abuse of the position of being a congressman. That's not what the district wants. He doesn't represent us and our values.
Mm-hmm. Well, Judge Joe McGraw, I took so much of your time. I looked at the time and I was like, "Whew, it was supposed to be 15 minutes. We're way past that." But Judge Joe McGraw, tell us how we can find you. What are your coordinates? How can we find out more about you and your campaign and what you're going to do for the members in the Congressional District 17?
Yeah, you can check us out online at judgejoeforcongress.com. That's our website. Also on social media, it's Judge Joe McGraw on Facebook and X. And, we keep reminding the folks in the district that we're going to represent them and their values. And the things we hear are the wide open southern border that Sorenson has refused to engage on. He's voted against securing the southern border. He's voted against requiring proof of citizenship to vote in the congressional election. And, the folks in the district they roll their eyes. I mean, this is not their America. And the economy, they're not falling for this idea that somehow Kamala is not responsible for the last 4 years of Bidenomics. And we know that Sorenson has been a rubber stamp for with Pelosi 95% of the time. So he's a puppet, and he's going to do what he's told, vote how he's told, instead of saying, is this good for the folks in the 17th? Is this going to make them more healthy, more safe, more prosperous? Or is this just some DC elitist agenda and totally unconnected to the health and welfare and prosperity of folks in the district? And so that's a message we've heard from our constituents, and we're going to keep pledging and vowing to make sure those are our priorities as well.
Judge Joe McGraw, thank you so much, and you have a blessed day. Folks,
Thank
this
you.
has been Conservative Cat, Cities 92.9.